We can start. Nice evening, folks. And so for those who don't know me, I'm Vasilena and I'm part of the Women Who Code Sofia team. Women Who Code is a professional community for women in tech, and we provide an avenue for women engineers to network, support each other, navigate their careers, and gain new tech skills. I'm so happy to be with all of you today, and especially with our special speaker, Maya Lekova from Google. So Maya, our virtual stage is all yours. And wish all of you nice discussion, and don't forget about the chat. And if you have questions, just write them there.
Thanks, Vasi. So hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today to talk a little bit about open source and how this, what we can do to join an open source project or actually work within a large project in tech. So just a few words for me for what I do. I'm currently working as an engineer on the V8 team at Google Munich. So that's a nice. It's already not so small, but when I joined 3 years ago, it was one of the smaller Google offices in Munich, and that was a reason to move to Munich. But now I'm back to Sofia, and I'm happy to join all of you this evening. Before joining Google, I worked mostly as a game developer and also some other projects related to computer graphics. And that was follow-up from my education as my formal education in informatics, which I studied at the Sofia University. And actually, after a couple of gap years, it was not only a single gap year, but after finishing informatics and working for a couple of years, I then did a master in e-learning, again in the Sofia University. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why I joined the V8 team at Google. And yeah, some of the things that I do every day for my job and also for some of the previous positions that I held is writing code, mostly in C++, and at some point I got interested in JavaScript as well. So the reason why I'm so interested also in the work that I'm doing in Google is because V8 is the JavaScript engine that powers the Chrome browser and is also part of Node.js. So it's all about executing JavaScript that web developers write to the fastest speed possible, possibly close to native speed. So our aim in the team that I work on is to make a scripting language like JavaScript execute really with the fastest speed possible and compete with native applications sometimes. Also, something that I do quite rarely as compared to my everyday job is sometimes speaking at events and also trying to help others learn something mostly related to technologies again. I firmly believe that with formal or informal, any form of education, basically, a person can improve their skills and find jobs that are closer to what they are really passionate about. And that's why a couple of years ago I joined the team of what later became an NGO, a non-profit organization called Education Without Backpacks, or in Bulgarian Образование без граници, which is our first mission was to translate Khan Academy, or at least parts of it, to Bulgarian and make that available to the Bulgarian students, because Khan Academy is also developed not as a not-for-profit website, so students around the world can use it for free, and that more or less led me into the direction of thinking more about education and eventually going into the e-learning masters. But yeah, today we're not gonna talk so much about education, maybe only as I will try to motivate you a little bit to not forget about education even after you've finished some educational degree or finished some course, to always look out for new things that you can learn. So the first part of the talk is going to be about some skills that I found useful in my over my practice as a software engineer, and I will try to give some tips about how you can learn some of these skills, and also probably some things that are not so common, or not so you yeah, you can't always predict what you're gonna learn next and do next, and especially within the information technology sphere, the technologies are changing so fast that you barely could predict what languages will be used after 10 years. So that's why I'll try to come to by sharing maybe some of the small experiences that I had along my work path, some of the things that surprised me, and also over this path helped me to learn and to grow as a professional. And then, yeah, maybe you will find some of those as useful tips for your career development. So the first thing that we'll start with, it's, I guess, quite common thing that you can hear from a career advisor. This is about building your toolbox. And the idea is that within the technical industry, just as any other engineering industry, you need to learn some set of tools, but also learn when to use which tool and what to use it for. So I can share some of the tools that I've learned along my work as a software engineer, and also might be useful for others. Of course, speaking about programming, we need to we need to mention the different programming languages, and something that has helped me along my career until now is learning languages from different paradigms. So usually you would start, the first thing that you would touch in programming is some scripting language, because those are the easiest to approach as a human, basically, because those are or interpreted languages such as Python or JavaScript or Basic if you started a while ago. And the scripting languages are something that is maybe the easiest as an entry level in a technical career, but on the other hand has some limitations, and many large-scale projects nowadays are written in languages that employ some of the techniques from scripting languages, but also at other paradigms such as object-oriented programming. So for this, the language that I'm mostly using is C++, which I would say is it's useful for projects that really need to be closer to the machine. to execute with the so-called native for speed, or other system projects. For instance, some field that I'm really not adept in, but many folks that learn C++ also end up writing embedded systems, which are either written in pure C, which is usually even faster to execute than C++, but also in embedded systems you aim to have a really good architecture of the project that allows you to write smaller modules, because object-oriented languages such as C++ allow you to write larger projects without by making them a little bit easier to support in the future, to develop in the future. So yeah, this is I guess the if you're interested in really fast executing applications, you should go for some system languages such as C, and recently a language that sounds very interesting to me. I've never personally had the opportunity to learn it, but I know that Firefox, the Firefox browser, for instance, moved part of their C++ code to this language. This is Rust. So this might be a language, the system language of the future, or at least that's the goal. And yeah, so basically, in your toolbox, you would aim to have a couple of languages, not too many, maybe only a few that you use as primary languages, but on the other hand, cover a wider set of use cases, because usually the object-oriented languages are intended for larger projects, and scripting languages can be used for automating these projects or writing tests to them. And you could choose basically a set of languages that you like writing in, and choose them in a way that they complement with each other and don't compete, because having in your toolbox too many languages that more or less have the same purpose it won't be very useful, because when you start a new task, it would be easier if you can choose a specific language for it and not have too many competing languages in your toolbox. And then something that you can do once you have these let's say common set of languages, or your primary languages, you can always aim to learn a new paradigm, for instance, functional programming, or either learn it as a new language or within a language you already know to some extent. For instance, JavaScript is a language that it's functional by design. So object-oriented programming is not part of it original design, although you can still do it. So you would want to learn either a new language, or within a language that you already know, find how to solve a problem in a different style, such as, for instance, functional. So that's one way to expand your toolbox. And then, yeah, this is also probably something not surprising with besides the languages that you express your code in, you can learn about different. The first two I actually learned about in university, but there are also nice books about both. these are the computer architectures. So this is to learn how the machine operates, maybe on a really high level. Learn that it's learn about the CPU and how it operates with the memory of the machine. Basically, at least an overview, a high level understanding of how this machine that you program for, how it operates. And networks are actually not so distant from that, from this knowledge. The networks would be useful for programming in a way that a single machine can operate with another one. So understanding the layers of the network stack is also useful. And nowadays, especially with cloud technologies, for instance, you can. It's really useful to learn about, at least to some extent, to some basic extent, about computer networks. And then you could choose your area of expressing as different types of applications, and you could write native or system applications or embedded in this, usually with the same tools, or you could write desktop applications that, for instance, of course, there are different technologies, but you can have a core of the application that is written as a system application, and the desktop part of it would be something like a shell around it. So something that communicates with this native layer, with the system layer. And then, of course, you can write mobile applications which are using the APIs, the interfaces that the operating system for the mobile device provides. And speaking of that, I actually forgot to mention that understanding also how the operating system works is a skill that I would highly recommend learning to some extent, because usually as users, we start with using a single operating system, but it crucially helps if you have some more in-depth understanding of, for instance, if you're using Windows, how the services in Windows work. Or if you're using some Unix-based system, again, you can learn about the services in the operating system, and you can usually those operating systems share similar concepts, like services are present in all modern desktop operating systems. So you as user can learn about those common concepts and deepen your knowledge by finding the differences between operating systems. Something that I found really useful for me was at some point I took the opportunity to create a dual boot system from my personal laptop and just try to compare what I can do in Windows and in Ubuntu in Linux. And yeah, speaking of Ubuntu, so some of the tools that you will definitely need as engineers, as software engineers, this is using the shell, either whatever operating system you're using, but for instance, for the Linux shell, some resources that I found useful, these are the forms of Ubuntu. It's usually, as you might have heard, Ubuntu is called, was originally, I think, called Ubuntu for Linux for human beings. So the nice part about its forums is that the folks there are pretty friendly, and I quite often end up reading information on them. So I highly recommend them. And then there are courses from the Linux Foundation that are paid, but they can really introduce you to the in-depth knowledge about the Linux operating systems. And then something that also is nowadays quite popular as a version control system. This is Git. So a course that I've personally used to understand how Git operates and what you can do with it. This used to be a course in the Code School website, which I found now that it's part of the Pluralsight suite of courses called Git.io. So I think Vasilena will help me later share these slides with you. So I have a couple of links within them to, if you're interested in a particular course, to just check it out. So if you're already using some other version control system beyond Git, this is of course perfectly fine. More or less, the version control system is again a tool that you need to learn up to some extent, not too much of it maybe, but basically feel comfortable with the basic actions that you can execute with it. And the same goes for the particular administrative systems that you're using in your current job, or if you're, to be honest, I don't think learning a bug tracking system or task tracking system for its own sake is very useful, unless the job that you're doing is, for instance, managing a project, and then knowing some automation of the system that your company is using is useful. But besides that, as a software engineer, you learn whatever is used by your company. If you're working for a company, or if you're working for a project as a freelance developer, also just use whatever the team is using. And something that I would highly encourage you to learn doing, and if your company is not doing it, maybe try to introduce it as a process. This is doing code reviews, and this has helped me enormously extend my skills as a software engineer, because actually reading other people code is sometimes more useful for you to grow your skill within a certain language or a certain technology. And on the other hand, it's super useful for the team, because if all of the code is written by single contributors and nobody takes a look at the code before it's being submitted, then usually you end up with code that only the person who wrote it really understands it. So code reviews help a lot with spreading knowledge among the team. And then some general skills that I found useful. This is presenting your work. For instance, nowadays many people use GitHub for that, for showcasing their open source projects. To be honest, quite for a long time, I didn't have any open source projects on GitHub. I only had some homeworks from the university, but that was it was useful anyway to learn how to use GitHub as an interface to Git mostly, and how to apply in practice these skills that you can learn, such as doing code reviews, basically reviewing other people's code, commenting on it, and learning from it. Also, if you're currently working on a team that doesn't have a formal process, you can try to find one that works. I've tried. I've been part of a team that used Scrum in a great with great results. Actually, it was a moment when the team lost. It was a relatively small team, around 15 developers, but suddenly all of the three senior developers quit at the same, basically within a couple of days, and then. Yeah, we lost a lot of the knowledge about the project, and then the technical director of the team decided, okay, we're gonna introduce Scrum to the best possible knowledge that we have, and this, first of all, it helped us keep going with the project because it gave us some velocity, some periodic checkpoints of developing the project, but it also greatly helped share knowledge within the more junior of us that were left on the team, and helped us actually not only being able to sustain the project as it was, but also develop it further and onboard new people, which then helped it develop even more. And of course, yes, some skills that are useful not only in technology nowadays. This is speaking in front of audience. This is something that I would say, of course, it's something that you can read about and attend a training about it. Actually, I have a link at the end of the presentation to an event that is organized each year, aiming to help people get involved in speaking on technology conferences in particular. But I would also say it just involves, you just need practice, because as any other skill, you can get better in it with practice, and you can also degrade your level at it if you don't practice it often. And yes, some other skill that I also was surprised that I actually needed. This was the statistics knowledge mostly from university, even though it wasn't my favorite subject. I actually had a pretty bad grade at it, but at some point I realized that it's a pretty practical skill to have, as long as you start doing optimizations, for instance, and you have some results from them that you want to analyze and make sense out of them. So I would also advocate for finding, if you have, for instance, a formal education in computer science or in some information technology field, you've probably learned mathematics in different subjects, and maybe it wasn't your favorite subject, or you didn't feel you're good at it. But at some point, those skills, even if you didn't get very proficient at them, they get very useful. So I would say those are necessary for everyday work. So yeah, as you might have already noticed, you can learn a lot about technology. You can just keep broadening your knowledge, and this is something that you might want to do at some points in your career, and also something that I did at some point, and I believe that is the reason why I ended up at my current position here at Google. Because originally, after deciding, okay, I want to apply my programming skills in a professional setting, I started as a game engine developer, because, yeah, back then I was in my let's say in my late teenage years, and I was really passionate about games, so I started with applying C++ skills in developing game engines. Actually, a game and its own engine. And at some point, I ended up coding the user interface of the game in JavaScript. So that's more or less, well, we just needed to write the interface, and JavaScript was a useful language to do that. So I just said, okay, I can learn that. And I did it by actually um, uh, just working on tasks about related to the user interface, and that's how I ended up learning JavaScript. And then after after I ended up my contract with this company, I decided to use my JavaScript skills to apply as a Node.js developer, and eventually that brought me to another company that after starting for some time as a Node.js developer, again, switching teams and based on the needs of that company, I started developing a learning program for the SDK that the company was developing. And that led me into thinking, okay, I'm interested in education, and now I need to do this learning program. I honestly, I had some knowledge about the topics of the program, but I didn't know at all how to structure it. I didn't have any approach to creating such a program. So at that point, I decided to try using my spare time for doing a master again in the Sofia University, because I was familiar with that with the programs that were offered by it, and I chose this e-learning program. And then that was a moment where I got contacted by a recruiter from Google, and when they asked me to apply for a position, and I told them, okay, but I'm doing my master's, they offered me instead to apply for an internship position, and I went to the V8 team eventually, doing an internship, and this is how then I transferred to a full-time position within the same team, because I really liked the project. And it was also, I believe, a nice coincidence just finding a team that I like to work with. So basically, from all of these small steps, I didn't do them as having a single goal in my mind or some distant goal of joining Google. Probably I wouldn't have ended up at the V8 team at all if I was aiming to join Google, because this team is really small compared to all of the other projects that Google has. And I believe the reason that I ended up there is that in the setting of the company that I was working at this time, I just tried doing my best to participate in the projects that I had some knowledge about, and were the most with the highest priority at that point. So you can try moving within your current company, working on side projects, or basically try to broaden your skills by doing the work that is with the highest priority for your team at that point. And yeah, eventually that might bring you to a totally new position, as happened for me. And something that I also can from, or let's say I'm surprised by this, but when I was doing my bachelor at the university, I had a couple of subjects that were interesting to me, but for one reason or the other were quite hard. And even though I tried, for instance, with the semantics of programming languages class, that my first attempt at that course was complete failure. So I ended up attempting a second time at the exam. And this is actually the only subject that we had in this in the informatics program that was barely related to compilers. And now I ended up writing a compiler. So this is something that more or less, I believe you don't have to give up on a certain field of technologies just because you failed at the exam at the university, or you had any bad grade. Another example is the discrete mathematics class, which was again a hard subject because just a couple of years before our cohort, it was divided into two semesters, but at some point they decided to merge the same material within a single semester, and it was indeed hard to learn within a single semester, but still it was actually, I think it's the mathematics course that I'm now using the most in my everyday job. So I would say focus on your inner motivation and whatever you're interested in, and maybe use this as a guide and not so much the grades that you're getting within formal education. And then you can also do for improving on things that you're not so good at. First of all, it's to realize what you're not so good at. For instance, I have stage fright. You might easily notice that by my speaking now. And my tips for working around that is doing enough practice, either up front or just going in front of people often enough to get a little bit more fluent at it, or also speaking together with a colleague, finding a buddy to talk with you on if you're presenting in front of conference, at the conference in front of a larger audience. You can try to grab as a buddy some of your colleagues, and that makes it easier for both of you, because you can make a dialogue between each other, and that usually helps with conveying the messages of the presentation in a more fluent way, and making the whole on the one hand, making the presentation easier for you, but also making it more useful and easier to grasp by the audience. Or something else that I'm really not good at. This is keeping my focus for a longer time. So when working in an open space in the office, I usually work with some music on when I want to focus on something, and when I want to instead be in touch with my colleagues, I put down the headphones and let myself overhear their conversations. And something else that helps for me personally is trying to schedule a time that I can allow myself to be distracted, either gathering meetings within a single slot in the day, so not having 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon, but instead having 2 consecutive hours in the afternoon, or scheduling some time to check email. To be honest, this is something that I don't do quite often, but I found it helpful when I did it. And something else that you can notice, and that I've noticed about myself, is that I'm more motivated when working on a project with someone else, either or let's say on a task, because usually on a project you work within a larger team, but on a given task, some techniques that you can try are doing pair programming. As I already mentioned, participating in code reviews, either to learn from the others, getting their feedback on your code, or trying to understand their code and giving them feedback to improve it. And that more or less is possible if you have a supportive team. So I would strongly advise you, if you're not a good lone wolf, if you're not if you don't feel so comfortable in working on your own, find a supportive team. That was really important for me whenever I in all of the companies that I worked until now. When I had a supportive team, then my own productivity was way higher and also helpful for the team itself. And then, yeah, this is something that maybe until now I was talking mostly about the positive steps or the positive sides of being a software engineer, but of course on every journey you would have also downsides and some more or less traps on the way, and you're not it's always possible to fall within a trap, but then it's important to know how to go on. And some of the traps that I had was after graduating with my bachelor degree that coincided with the project that I worked on being closed. And that made me decide to leave the company because I didn't want to work on their other project. And eventually I ended up losing the job that I had and also finishing the university, fortunately successfully, but suddenly I ended up without anything to do day to day. And that left me in a let's say in some not so motivated state, and it took me some time to find let's say a new direction, but it was related again to what I was doing before, but it took me some time to realize what I want to continue doing. And at that point what I did was taking online courses for a while. Actually, I think I only took one seriously, but that brought me that moved me from writing JavaScript as a UI language to writing it on the server side, because it was a course about Node.js. So this might be if you end up at some point losing your motivation because of some break that you have that is not initiated by you, then you could try learning a new skill, and at some point more or less you end up finding either how to apply this skill and this moving in a certain direction, or finding that, okay, I don't want this skill, I actually found something else. But basically don't stop at this point. And then at some point I was working as a again as an engineer on a small company that was more or less a startup, and because of having not so great performance, at some point I got sick, and at that moment I got a call from my manager at that point, and he more or less put me on a trial period. So he said, because we were working without a permanent contract because it was a startup, the manager said, okay, either you finish this and this task and improve your performance within a week, or we need to fire you. And I said, okay, I'll think about it. And then after it didn't took more than a day to call him back and tell him, okay, I prefer that I would simply leave, because I didn't believe that putting you on such a plan on this trial period while you're sick is something that is a good future thing to communicate with your manager at least. And I was quite happy that I kind of got fired, but eventually I ended up the relationship with this team and with the company actually. And then yeah, over my search for interesting projects, and I think I've from the all of the times that I applied for a job, I failed 2 or 3 of the interviews, which is, let's say, half of all of the attempts that I had, or almost half. And I think that's of course at the moment that you hear okay, you're not a good fit, the first thing is to think is to be unhappy about it. But eventually you realize that if you're not a good fit for the team, then maybe also the project is not such a good fit for you. And failing on an interview is something that I would say is useful to go through, just to go through the feeling and have a sense of what it means. But it is could be beneficial for your career over the long term, because it's if after the interview process the company or the team doesn't find you being a good fit and they still hire you, that might be a future that might bring more tension in the future. And then at some point in one of my previous companies, I went through a burnout, which was mostly caused by taking on too many side projects beyond the project that I was working on in the company, and more or less trying to do too many things at once. And yeah, this is something quite dramatic. After going through that, at that point, I didn't have any idea what that means. I didn't feel any of the warning signs. But after that, speaking to other people who've been through burnout, I realized it's something that you can only predict early enough if you know the warning signs. And since people don't talk so much about it, at least in Bulgaria, it's at that point it was not such a popular topic. It's not so easy to predict that it would happen, but there are things that if you're for instance feeling less motivated about not only your work but also things that you typically like doing, then you can feel those as early warning signs, and you can try to read about it or seek help. And as early as the earlier you do it, the better the outcome will be usually, and the easier you go through it. And in my case, it was quite dramatic, unfortunately, but yeah, it's also something that teaches you how to find your own limit and how to be careful about it. So at that point, I think what helped me was to try to go back to because at that point I was thinking, okay, am I in the have I chosen the correct profession for me, the best profession that I could do? And then going back to what has motivated you initially is something that can be very, very helpful. And yeah, following your passion, as naive as it might sound, is something that can bring you out of such a dramatic moment. And then maybe something more practical to deepen the skills that you already have. and grow not only in when adding more and more skills, but also the ones that you've already learned to some extent, so how to get better at them. Something that you've probably done, and working as a software engineer, you've been through some interviews, but something that can always surprise you, and it surprised me also when applying for this transition from an internship to a full-time position at Google. That was the coding interviews. And what helped me at that point was practicing by solving interview tasks or typical interview tasks. Those are somewhat similar to tasks from coding competitions, which I was never really good at. So what I did before the day that was scheduled for the interviews, I was solving one problem a day from a website that was allowing me to easily time the solutions that I'm creating, and time both measure the time that I'm writing them, but also the time that they're executing, and comparing them against the expectation for this task and for this language. So what I think I did it for 1 month, which is quite a lot when I'm thinking back to it. But just solving one problem a day get me into the into this state of being prepared for solving problems within a limited time. So if you're aimed for a particular company, you can ask in advance or search online what kind of questions they would ask, they would expect you to know about, and practice solving them. And then it's of course important when to stop, because if you already have a scheduled interview, that's some kind of a deadline, and if you just practice to the last possible moment, at least from my experience, that's not the best strategy. And if you leave 1 or 2 days before the interview or the interviews to just let your mind sink or to let the practice sink in your mind, this is somewhat more useful. It's also like preparing for any competition, either programming or mathematics competition. It's good to practice regularly, but not over practice just before the competition, because that actually makes your mind more tired, and doesn't allow you to show your best potential at the day of the interview. And then something that it's also not really unpopular as an advice, but this is to find a mentor and learn from them. So it's surprising. Of course, there are formal mentors that you can try finding, either within your company or outside of it. I would say within the company, if you have a specific formal mentorship program, you can apply for that. But if you don't have, or if for some other reason you prefer to not join such a program, then a great learning experience is doing tasks together with your peers or more senior colleagues, and also sometimes with more junior colleagues, because those often bring fresh perspective to the team, and they even if there is some formal hierarchy and they are lower level than your level or something like this, working together, designing solutions together, coding together can teach you a lot. So basically, working together with your peers is something that can be as good as having a formal mentor. And then something that that this is sometimes helpful, but this is of course not very it's not structured, it's not something predictable. But if you have friends that are also in the tech industry, some random advice from them can be quite beneficial at some points. So just be open to catch such pieces of advice. And then speaking about formal mentorship or formal opportunities to deepen your knowledge at certain skills, something that is offered by Google is this grow.google website. And there are online courses that are offered for free. It's, I would say, for people that are already adept in certain technologies, those might not be so useful for deepening certain skills, but more for broadening the set of skills that you have. And and then for folks that are starting their career, the website offers also digital certification through Coursera. And probably you've heard about Coursera. They also offer great online courses on various skills. And their digital certificates, though, are paid. And but you can showcase them as part of your CV, or maybe even on your LinkedIn profile. Not sure about it. But speaking of that, also LinkedIn is offering online courses, and I think you can easily showcase the certificates from them. And also the Plural site that I mentioned earlier with the Git course is offering again some certificates. So I would highly recommend for broadening the set of skills that you have and seeking new opportunities to just try to follow some of these online classes. And for instance, the latest one that I'm trying to follow is a compilers class, because after starting on the V8 project, I realized that the classes that we had at the university more or less touched on the topic about compilers, but we never really had a well-structured class starting from the basics of this huge and very interesting area. So at that point, what I did was, again, go for online courses, because this is something that is a useful format for me personally. And then other opportunities that you might be interested about. This is an event that is, I think it's, yeah, not sure about the dates, but it's a conference that I think this year is happening online, which is targeted to different groups. Actually academics and professionals that are working in the field, but also entrepreneurs that build their own project, maybe startup, find a startup. And also they are offering mentoring circles for career development. So I think based on your background, if you're currently into university or working, there are various ways to apply for this conference. And then this Global Diversity Call for Proposals Day is an event that is organized globally each year. I think it started a couple of years ago. And the aim of it is to attract more people from underrepresented groups to become more, to improve their public speaking skills, and basically become a better speaker in technology topics. So this year it already I think it was already in January. So maybe you could stay tuned for the next edition, which will probably be in the beginning of next year, and it's free to attend. It's again, even before the pandemic, they were organizing it online, so you could easily attend it from various parts of the world. And something that I actually found just yesterday is called Hedge. It's an, I think, not non-for-profit organization, and its aim is to support specifically female founders of either companies or startups, and they are again offering mentorship. So this might be something that you would want to check out if you're going into the direction of finding your own company. So yeah, this was everything that I have prepared for today, and I would love to now have, yeah, either hear something that you would want to discuss more, or maybe some question that I completely omitted and you would be interested in.
Thank you, Maya. It was a nice presentation. And now it's time for your questions. And you can use chat or just to ask. Okay, Maya, I have one question, and it's how do you balance professional work and open source? I think this is a very interesting question, and it would be nice if you ask now, if you, yes, you give an answer.
Right. Yeah, so this is something that I actually yeah, myself struggled for a while, and I know there are not many unfortunately not many women who contribute to open source projects, because if it's yeah it's if you do it for only the fun of it, then you rarely find enough time to invest enough effort to be to contribute in a meaningful way to such a project.
Mhm.
And I actually didn't have any major open source contributions before joining the V8 team. So part of the reason why I'm doing now open source work is that Google decided to open source the project a while ago. So it was actually an open source project that they acquired the team, and they kept it open source and did their best to keep an open source community around it, and make it accessible for external contributors. So actually my day-to-day job is to contribute to an open source project. And before joining a full-time position, working as an open source contributor, what I did was, when using an open source project, and for instance finding something that I would like to improve in it, try to submit a patch for it. For instance, when working with Node.js, most of the ecosystem, most of the modules that are used in Node.js are open source, and they, of course, you try to find the best module for your needs, but it's something that it's not always 100% doing the task that you want to do with it. And at that point, you end up modifying it a little bit. And at that moment, even if it's not part of your everyday job, you could try to to contribute this back to the maintainers of the project.
Mhm.
So yeah, maybe just doing small contributions on projects that you already use is
Mhm.
something that you could do if it's not part of your, if it's not your main goal in your everyday job.
Mhm. Got it. And we have one more question from Kati. What does open source mean? Can you talk about that at high level?
Okay, so I guess open source is. I'm definitely not the best person to answer such a question, because this is there are probably many definitions of open source, but what I how I understand it is something that you could use for, let's say, for free, but you could also contribute to for free, and that is more or less. There are many projects out there, let's say on GitHub, that are open source in the sense that you can freely use their code for your own purposes, of course, depending on the license of the project, but not that many of them have also a community and guides that help other people to contribute. So I would say open source project is something that has certain guidelines towards keeping it accessible to others to contribute to. Maybe not so. Of course, some of them have companies that are funding their development, such as the V8 project, which is funded partially by Google. But there are also, well, actually, recently we started having contributors from Microsoft because they started using the project. So I would say open source is something that you use and makes you want to contribute back to it.
Perfect. And very quickly, what are the steps to become part of one open source project?
Okay, so if you've already interested in a certain topic and you found a certain project that you're interested in contributing to, then you need to find where the source code is hosted, because usually that comes with if it's on GitHub, then it usually has a README or contributing guide, which is giving you the concrete steps that you need to do to contribute to this particular project. Also gives you the style or guidelines to the style that the people in the project are using, because you would want to more or less be consistent with the style that the others are using to make your code readable for them. And if you're still on the look for a particular project, then I guess two things that might help you is first of all, find a topic that you're interested in, and some area that you care about. For instance, I don't know, you care about education, then you find 3 projects that are in this area and are open source, and then the way that you can choose some of them to contribute to is by seeing the technology stack they are using in the project, and trying to find the best fit with the technologies that you feel somewhat confident with.
Thank you, Maya. And maybe last call for any questions. Not be shy. Okay. Maybe no. Maya, I want to thank you and appreciate your time to our community. And thank you to all participants today. We will share the presentation as email, and we will share our next event maybe next week. And yeah, wish you a great evening and see you soon.
Thank you very much again, and it was a great pleasure to meet with you, and yeah, Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you, Maya. And bye-bye for all of you.